According to the FBI's official case file, designated NORJAK, the man known as Dan Cooper was described as a white male in his mid-40s, approximately 6 feet tall and 170 pounds. He had brown eyes, possibly brown hair, and appeared calm and well-spoken. He wore a dark business suit, a white shirt, a narrow black necktie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and dark sunglasses. He carried a black briefcase and a brown paper bag. To every other passenger on the plane, he appeared to be an ordinary businessman. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner, who was seated in the jump seat nearest to him. According to her FBI interview, Schaffner initially assumed the note was a man's phone number and slipped it into her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned toward her and whispered that she should read the note because he had a bomb. Schaffner opened the note. It stated that he had a bomb in his briefcase and that she should sit next to him. She did as instructed. According to Schaffner's statement to the FBI, Cooper opened his briefcase briefly and showed her what appeared to be a bundle of red cylinders connected to wires and a large battery. Whether it was an actual explosive device was never determined. Cooper then dictated his demands. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane upon landing. He was precise, methodical, and showed no signs of nervousness. The flight crew relayed Cooper's demands to the airline and to the FBI through air traffic control. According to FAA records, Northwest Orient Airlines President Donald Nyrop authorized the full payment of the ransom, and the FBI quickly assembled the money. The $200,000 consisted of 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, but the FBI recorded the serial number of every single bill. This would later prove to be the most critical piece of evidence in the entire investigation, though it would take nearly a decade to produce results. Flight 305 circled over the Puget Sound for approximately 2 hours while authorities assembled the ransom and parachutes. According to the flight crew's FBI interviews, Cooper remained calm throughout the delay. He chatted politely with flight attendant Tina Mucklow, ordered another bourbon, and even offered to request meals for the crew. He was described as courteous and deliberate, more like a businessman conducting a transaction than a desperate criminal making threats. His composure would become one of the most memorable aspects of the case. At approximately 5:39 p.m., Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. According to the FBI's timeline, the ransom money and parachutes were delivered to the aircraft via a ground vehicle. Cooper inspected the money and the parachutes carefully. He then released all 36 passengers and most of the crew. He kept 4 crew members aboard: the pilot, first officer, flight engineer, and flight attendant Tina Mucklow. He ordered the crew to refuel the plane and prepare for takeoff with a specific set of flight instructions. Cooper's flight instructions were remarkably specific and demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of aviation. According to the FBI case file, he ordered the crew to fly toward Mexico City at a maximum altitude of 10,000 feet with the landing gear deployed, the wing flaps set to 15 degrees, and the cabin unpressurized. He also demanded that the aft staircase of the Boeing 727 remain lowered during flight. The 727 was unique among commercial aircraft in having a rear staircase that could be opened during flight, a detail Cooper clearly knew. At approximately 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off from Seattle heading south toward Reno, Nevada, for a planned refueling stop before continuing to Mexico. According to crew statements, Cooper instructed Tina Mucklow to join the other crew members in the cockpit and close the curtain between the first-class cabin and the rest of the plane. At approximately 8:13 p.m., the crew noticed a sudden change in air pressure and a warning light indicating that the aft staircase had been activated. Cooper had lowered the rear stairs of the aircraft in flight. Somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington state, on a dark and rainy November night, D.B. Cooper stepped out onto the aft staircase of the Boeing 727 with the $200,000 strapped to his body and a parachute on his back. He jumped into the freezing darkness at approximately 10,000 feet. The temperature outside the aircraft was approximately 7 degrees below zero. The wind was howling. Rain and sleet battered the landscape below. He dropped into the night and vanished from the face of the earth. The FBI launched an immediate and massive search of the suspected drop zone, an area of dense forest wilderness south of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. According to Bureau records, the search involved hundreds of FBI agents, military personnel, local law enforcement, and civilian volunteers. They covered thousands of acres of rugged terrain over the following weeks. Helicopters scanned from above while ground teams pushed through impenetrable undergrowth. The weather was brutal, with near constant rain and freezing temperatures. They found nothing. The case, internally designated NORJAK by the FBI, quickly became one of the most intensive criminal investigations in American history. According to Bureau records, more than 800 suspects were identified and investigated in the years following the hijacking. The FBI pursued leads across the United States and in multiple foreign countries. They analyzed the physical evidence left behind on the aircraft, including Cooper's clip-on tie, which he had removed before jumping, his bourbon glass, and the cigarette butts from his seat. Each item was tested for fingerprints and trace evidence. One of the most significant leads came in February 1980, nearly 9 years after the hijacking. According to the FBI, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was playing on the banks of the Columbia River at Tennebar, about 9 miles downstream from Vancouver, Washington, when he found 3 bundles of deteriorating $20 bills buried in the sand. The serial numbers on the bills matched those from the Cooper ransom. It was the first and only confirmed recovery of any of the ransom money. The rest of the $200,000 has never been found. The discovery of the money raised more questions than it answered. According to FBI analysis, the bills were found arranged in a way that suggested they had been deposited by the river over time, not buried deliberately. But the location was inconsistent with the FBI's estimated drop zone, which was far to the east. Hydrologists were consulted to determine how the money could have traveled from the suspected landing area to Tennebar. Their analysis suggested several possible routes involving tributaries and flooding patterns, but no definitive conclusion was reached. Among the most prominent suspects investigated by the FBI was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., a decorated Vietnam War veteran and helicopter pilot who committed an almost identical hijacking just 5 months after Cooper's. According to court records, McCoy hijacked a United Airlines 727 in April 1972, demanded $500,000, and parachuted out the rear staircase over Utah. He was arrested days later. McCoy was convicted and sentenced to 45 years in prison. He was killed during an escape attempt in 1974. The FBI could never definitively link him to the Cooper hijacking. Another compelling suspect was Robert Rackstraw, a former Army paratrooper and Vietnam veteran with a criminal history. According to investigative journalists and a team of cold case investigators, Rackstraw had the skills, the temperament, and the timeline that matched Cooper's profile. He was an experienced skydiver, a pilot, and an explosives expert. He also had a documented history of deception and assumed identities. However, the FBI investigated Rackstraw extensively and concluded there was insufficient evidence to charge him. Rackstraw died in 2019 denying any involvement. In 2011, a woman named Marla Cooper came forward claiming that her uncle, Lynn Doyle Cooper, had confessed to the hijacking during a family Thanksgiving gathering in 1971. According to her account, which was reported by multiple news outlets, her uncle had returned home on Thanksgiving Day bloody and battered, claiming he had been in a car accident. She later found newspaper clippings about the hijacking in his possessions. The FBI investigated the claim but could not confirm or deny the identification. Lynn Doyle Cooper died in 1999. The physical evidence from the aircraft was analyzed with increasingly sophisticated technology over the decades. According to FBI lab reports, Cooper's clip-on tie was found to contain over 100,000 particles of rare earth elements, including titanium and cerium, suggesting its wearer had been exposed to metals used in aerospace manufacturing or chemical engineering. This narrowed the suspect pool significantly, pointing to someone who worked in a specialized industrial environment. Despite this lead, the particles were never matched to a specific individual or workplace. In July 2016, the FBI made an announcement that stunned the true crime community. According to their official statement, the Bureau was officially closing the active investigation into the D.B. Cooper case after 45 years. They stated that while the case would not be actively investigated, they would accept any physical evidence that could be linked to Cooper through forensic analysis. The decision was controversial. Many investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths argued that the case was close to being solved and that giving up was premature. Despite the FBI's withdrawal, independent investigators have continued to pursue the case with remarkable dedication. According to citizen investigation groups, new evidence and theories continue to emerge. In 2017, a team of scientists claimed to have found biological evidence on the tie that could yield DNA. Other researchers have used advanced satellite imaging to search the suspected drop zone for parachute remnants or other artifacts. The case has become a collaboration between professional and amateur investigators united by a shared obsession with solving the mystery. The question of whether Cooper survived the jump remains hotly debated. According to experienced skydivers and military parachutists consulted by investigators, the conditions Cooper faced were extremely challenging. He jumped at night, in heavy rain, wearing a business suit and loafers with no helmet or goggles, into mountainous wilderness in late November. The temperature at altitude was well below freezing. Some experts believe he could not have survived. Others point out that an experienced paratrooper could handle the jump and that Cooper clearly knew what he was doing. The myth of D.B. Cooper has become deeply embedded in American popular culture. According to cultural historians, Cooper has been the subject of dozens of books, multiple films, television episodes, songs, and even an annual festival held near the suspected drop zone in Ariel, Washington. Unlike most criminals, Cooper is often romanticized as a folk hero, a well-dressed gentleman who committed a daring crime, harmed no one, and disappeared into legend. The D.B. Cooper story represents the allure of the perfect getaway, the criminal who beat the system. It is worth noting that the name D.B. Cooper is itself an error. According to the FBI case file, a hijacker identified himself as Dan Cooper when purchasing his ticket. A reporter covering the story confused the name with that of another person of interest, Daniel B. Cooper, and the erroneous name D.B. Cooper entered public consciousness. The real Dan Cooper ticket alias may have been inspired by a French-language comic book series about a fictional paratrooper named Dan Cooper, suggesting the hijacker may have had ties to French-speaking culture. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow, who spent the most time with Cooper during the hijacking, has largely avoided the public eye in the decades since. According to the few interviews she has given, Mucklow described Cooper as polite, measured, and even kind in his interactions with her. She said he seemed genuinely concerned about the safety of the passengers and crew. After the hijacking, Mucklow left her career as a flight attendant and entered a religious order, reportedly deeply affected by the experience. She has declined most interview requests. According to the FBI, the serial numbers of all 10,000 ransom bills were distributed to banks, casinos, and financial institutions throughout the Pacific Northwest. Remarkably, aside from the bundles found at Tena Bar, not a single bill from the ransom has ever surfaced in circulation. This fact is extraordinary and suggests one of several possibilities. Cooper died in the jump and the money was lost in the wilderness, he successfully hid the money and never spent it, or he spent it in a way that avoided detection entirely. In the aftermath of the Cooper hijacking, the FAA implemented a series of changes that fundamentally altered commercial aviation. According to FAA records, a device known as the Cooper vane was installed on all Boeing 727 aircraft, preventing the rear staircase from being lowered during flight. Additionally, all commercial passengers were required to be screened before boarding, a practice that would evolve into the extensive security measures we know today. D.B. Cooper, ironically, helped create the modern airport security experience. The dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, where Cooper is believed to have landed, are among the most impenetrable wilderness areas in the continental United States. According to forestry surveys, the region features thick old-growth forest, steep ravines, swollen rivers, and terrain so rugged that large portions remain unexplored even today. If Cooper died in the jump, his body and the remaining ransom money could easily be lost forever beneath decades of accumulated undergrowth, fallen trees, and forest debris in an area that sees few human visitors. Some investigators believe the key to solving the case lies not in the drop zone but in the clip-on tie. According to forensic scientist Tom Kay, who has studied the tie extensively, the rare earth elements found on it were used in only a few specific industries during the early 1970s. Companies that manufactured cathode ray tubes, certain types of metal alloys, and specialized chemical compounds used these materials. Cross-referencing employees of these companies with the physical description and timeline could potentially identify Cooper. This avenue of investigation remains active. The legend of D.B. Cooper has inspired a unique subculture of dedicated researchers who call themselves Cooperites. According to these amateur investigators, online forums and annual gatherings have produced thousands of pages of analysis, alternative theories, and suspect profiles. Some researchers have devoted decades of their lives to the case, traveling to the suspected drop zone, interviewing witnesses, and filing Freedom of Information Act requests for FBI documents. Their collective work represents one of the most sustained citizen investigation efforts in the history of American crime. Over 50 years have passed since a man in a dark suit stepped off the back of a Boeing 727 and into the rain-soaked darkness over Washington state. According to the FBI, D.B. Cooper is the only person to successfully hijack a commercial aircraft in the United States and never be identified. Whether he survived the jump or perished in the wilderness, whether the money is buried in the forest or hidden in a wall, whether his real name will ever be known, these questions may never be answered. The night sky took D.B. Cooper, and it has never given him back.